Hello, everybody. Welcome to Vintage Books Live. Tonight we are interviewing Emmeline Duncan, also known as Kelly Garrett, and she has a new book coming out tomorrow called Double Shot Death. It is a cozy mystery, and it's the second in the Ground Rules mystery series. So we're super excited to talk to her about it. And I am going to start out by asking you, Kelly, what if you could just describe a little bit about the book without, obviously it's a murder mystery, so don't give it don't give anything away, but if you could just tell the viewers a little bit about the book.
Well, the series as a whole is based around a coffee cart and roastery in Portland, Oregon. The first book takes place at a food cart pod, and then the second book, Double Shot Death, has my sleuth going on the road to a music festival. And so she sets up her car at a eco-friendly music festival in the outskirts of Portland. And since she's the coffee vendor, she's the first one up every morning. So she's the one that finds the body of a local music manager dead in the bushes holding one of her coffee cups. And it's a cozy mystery, so she has to solve it.
Yay, cool. I am gonna hang on just a second. Sorry about that. I realized I had the door open. Did you always plan to write a sequel to the first one, or did this come about later?
Well, the series sold initially as a 3-book deal. So I always knew there'd be at least 3 books in the series and hopefully more. And so when I wrote the first, I did try to leave some space and some areas that I could explore in future books.
Yeah. And I'm curious, cozy mystery is a bit of a departure from your previous book, which for those of you who don't know, was called The Last to Die and is a YA thriller. And there might be another one in there that I'm forgetting about. How did you land writing cozy mysteries instead of thrillers?
Well, I've always been a huge mystery fan, and I've always loved cozy mysteries. I think they're incredibly fun to read. And so when I decided to write for adults, it felt very natural to end up writing in the cozy mystery space. It really suits my voice pretty well. And now some of the features of cozy mysteries, the minimal on-page violence, minimal swearing, stuff like that, it felt like very natural to write, to get into and to write, while still having like a fun puzzle and a lot of fun things going on. It's kind of funny because my YA thriller has a female anti-hero, and it's very, very different from a cozy mystery. So that's one of the reasons I use a pen name, because there's not necessarily a lot of overlap between the 2 books, or the book in the series.
How did you choose your pen name? I'm curious. It's such a great pen name.
My 3rd great grandmother was Emmeline Duncan, and so I just borrowed from my family tree.
That's great. I love that. I'm curious, in your opinion, this is one of those things that, there's no one right answer, but I observe in the literary world that sometimes there's a hierarchy of, there's literary books and then there's not literary books, and cozy mysteries and other fiction titles tend to fall into the not literary, even though I think that's not, in my personal opinion, is that's not necessarily well deserved. But I'm curious what you think books like cozy mysteries or lighter fiction titles or things like that bring to people, what they have to offer, as opposed to maybe a literary title that's also important but maybe has a different goal.
Yeah, it is true. I mean, mysteries tend to be more commercial. Of course, there's some mysteries I get, advertised as like a literary mystery, which is sort of funny, because I mean, in a way, like, what does that mean? Because there are some like very commercial books that are incredibly well written, right? That also have like, that really explore character instead of being purely plot driven. And it's interesting because even in the mystery world, cozies are frequently, I think not all, but a lot of cozy writers are women. A lot of the readers are women. So they're even sort of put at the side of like even treated less seriously than like dark noir books, as if they're somehow less important, which is really strange. I mean, because I think there's a couple of reasons I think people love to read cozies. Like, one is like sometimes you don't want to read a ton of violence, right? And you want to enjoy yourself, you want to have a good puzzle, you want to explore a world, but you don't want to, you don't want everything to dark. You don't want to feel depressed, right? You want to enjoy it. And one thing that I find interesting with cozies is that they tend, because they feature amateur sleuths, they tend to show women following their passions, right? Like they start a mystery bookstore, they start a yarn shop, you know, there's something that they're really passionate about and they're able to turn that into a career, which I think there's a really nice level of kind of wish fulfillment there, because who wouldn't want to absolutely love what you do and to be able to strike out and do it, you know, and be not like, you know, turning yourself into a billionaire, but successful and to create a life you want to live. And, you know, not all of them, like, because my book is set in Portland, a lot of the series are set in like charming small towns, right? And who wouldn't want to go live in like a Stars Hollow like place, or a small town where, you know, people know each other and there might be like, you know, petty arguments, but other than the occasional death, people get along really well.
I love that. Other than the occasional death. And I honestly, I totally agree. And I kind of thought that that was going to be along the lines of what your answer was going to be, because I see the same thing happening even in like in fiction. You know, the mass market paperbacks are kind of viewed with sort of a like a lower level than maybe a you know, like a not even a literary, but there always is a hierarchy. And I just feel like, and there'll be people that come into the bookstore sometimes and who like almost seem embarrassed about whatever book they're choosing to read. And I always just feel like, you know what, you know, this is giving you joy, this is helping you step away from whatever world you're living in. And I just love that there's so many options. And honestly, for me, the cozy mystery reminds me a lot of like British mysteries, you know, Miss Marple, or you know, they have that same sort of it's not as dark, and you know, you have the amateur sleuths and they're clever and they're figuring things out. And I really enjoy the escape, um and the sort of the joy, and the, you know, there's something at the core of those kind of books that's different than maybe a more darker, more serious
Well, I
mystery
think
book.
another key thing with cozy is that the murder somehow throws the world that the character lives in out of balance. And so by solving it, right, you bring balance and like a new normal back to where you live. And that's, you know, really hopeful, right? It would be nice to think. I mean, we've been in with COVID for a couple of years, and
Yeah.
think how nice it would be if we could like solve that easily and, you know, get a world back into a new normal. You know,
Yeah.
that's what we would.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Do you have a favorite coffee drink? I noticed that I was flipping through the book again tonight when I was prepping questions, and I noticed that there are recipes in the back. And there's a couple coffee related recipes, but I'm curious what your favorite coffee drink is.
Well, it's funny. I'm kind of a purist. I tend to drink a lot of pour overs, usually with a little bit of Oatly. And so one of my favorites is really a pretty basic cup of coffee. Once in a while, like I'll go out and get like usually like a latte made usually with like Oatly is my definitely my first choice of non-dairy milks. And I can't do dairy, so it has to be non-dairy.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that's like the occasional that or like a cappuccino. But I'm really a purist. I'm just a pour over like basically at least 7 days a week. Or
Is
not, well, it
that,
can't be more than 7 days because there's only
yeah.
seven.
Well, sometimes it feels like it's more than 7 days. So I'm curious, like backtracking from that, like where did the idea, you know, that she would be, that her particular passion and that the, you know, would be the coffee cart, was there something in your own life that sort of led to the development of that idea, or was it just inspired by, you know, being in Portland, which is a pretty well-known coffee loving area, or
Well, a big inspiration for the book was there used to be a food cart pod not too far from my house that had a coffee cart, Ole Latte. And my dog and I, when we would like go for a walk, going to the coffee cart was his favorite thing to do because they had dog treats. And they would know that we were coming because he would get excited and start barking. He was a big lab. He would start barking like 2 blocks away. And so they would be like, oh, Connor's on his way. And I got to know the owner of Ole Latte. I got to know some of the other food carts, and I realized that they were a small community in and of themselves, right? They had their own set of sort of like standards and their own, you know, sort of like community rules, right? Because every community has their own unwritten rules. And obviously there's like legal laws, and then there's like those unspoken codes, or sometimes
Mhm.
spoken, that like we follow. And I realized like, oh, it's an interesting little community in of itself. And I'm like, it'd be really fun to write a book at a food cart pod, because I really like coffee, and Portland is such a great like spot for coffee. I'd also thought about, would it be like to write like a coffee book in Portland? I'm like, oh, a coffee cart would be perfect. It's a very, it's an interesting take compared to a lot of the coffee cozies that are out there. It's well suited for a younger character, because both of my characters in their late 20s, starting their own business. Starting a food cart pod is a lot, has like lower financial investment than like starting like a brick and mortar store. And it gives a lot of flexibility, because
Yeah.
they can, be in a food cart pod for a while, and then once a bunch of people have died and they can move, and that's like the food cart pod of death, they can move someplace
Yeah.
else.
That's awesome. I used to watch Murder She Wrote, and there used to be a joke going around that, like, how are there any people left in the town? Because there's always somebody new that can die. And then she
Be
goes on
like,
the road so somebody else can die. Oh, I
Cabot
think that's
Cove
super
used to be a
fun.
population 10,000, now population 3,000.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Oh my goodness. And then I'm curious, you said that there was a 3-book deal for the Ground Rules Mysteries, so there must be a third one in the works. Is it
Yeah.
something that you can talk about yet, or is it still like, do you have a title that you have
Oh
in
yeah.
mind that you can talk about, or?
The title's official. It's going to be Flat White Fatality, and it will come out in 2023.
All right, I'm writing this down. So I can. And do you see there being more books after the first 3?
Well,
Are you like thinking in your head of more
oh,
places to send her?
oh yeah, I have lots and lots of ideas for where the directions that the series could go, and like fun spots to set a mystery. And a lot of it depends on the readers, right? Like the people
Yeah,
listening here
exactly.
today.
Yeah.
And I want my publisher to pick it up for more books, but that'll be, there's one of my favorite sayings is that writing is an art, but publishing is the business.
Yeah.
And so it'll be a financial decision, right? If more books are picked up. And obviously I really hope that happens,
Yeah.
but I also just feel lucky that at least I get to do these 3.
Yeah. That's awesome. It's always so exciting when they're committing to 3, like of more than one at the beginning, because that gives you some freedom to just go and have fun and think of ideas. Do
When
you have
cozy
other?
mysteries tend to be sold in 3s.
Oh, okay. I did not know
At least
that. That's
initially.
very cool. Do you have other books in the works too? Or are you mostly focusing on these?
Well, this is definitely my priority. I have a few projects that are in process, nothing that I have like any interesting news yet, but obviously I
Yeah.
hope something happens with a
Awesome.
couple, things that I would love to hopefully sell in the next year. So
That's so cool. Yay. All right. So Flat White Fatality next year, but Double Shot Death tomorrow.
mhm.
And we have signed copies in the store. Thank you for stopping by. It's very exciting. So they'll go out on the shelves tomorrow. And the last question I always end with is, do you have any books that you have read recently that you really enjoyed, or that are coming out soon that you've read and really enjoyed?
Well, I can think of a couple that I love. This is a little darker than a cozy mystery. I really loved The Last Smile of Sunder City by Luke Arnold. And it's, if you took like a hard-boiled PI novel written by someone that understands the tropes, and then threw it into like a high fantasy world where
Oh,
magic has recently
interesting.
died. And you have a character who he's human, but he only represents clients that were like magical creatures. And it's a really fun book. It definitely has a pretty like fantasy noir sort of feel. So if you're looking for like a happier read, I would probably avoid it.
Buy Double Shot Death instead.
Exactly, much lighter and happier book to read. It's funny, I read so much that sometimes like I almost blank when people ask me, and I should
Yeah,
be
no,
ready.
I know, I
One of
know.
well, one
It's
of
hard to
my
remember
favorite
which ones
mystery.
are out, because I'm sure you get a few like pre-release stuff too, and so it's hard to remember.
Yeah.
Oh, is that one out yet? Or can I say that yet?
And one of my favorite mystery writers is Jane Casey. She's based in the UK. She has a police procedural series written about from a female perspective of someone. I think character starts out in her 20s, like late 20s, and she's a detective. Starts out as a detective constable working in London, And so they have the procedural element, but she's a really fantastic writer. Like she's a great example. Earlier you talked about like literary merit of mystery books. Like
Yeah,
on a
yeah.
writing level, she's amazing. She has fantastic plots, but some of her sentences are just beautiful, and she plays with character really well, and the characters evolve over the course of the series in a really fantastic way. Yeah. And so I definitely tell people, like, check out Jane Casey. I know she also had a standalone come out last year.
Very cool. All right. Well, thank you so much for talking to us. We're so excited that your book's coming out. And I wasn't in the store today. I think you dropped off swag too. Is that right?
That is right. I left
Okay.
some little bags that have a homemade ground rolls mystery candle. You might get
Nice.
a Hazel Homicide, Coffee Shop Caper,
Oh, that's
Bookshop
great.
Bandit, or Mocha Murder candle in that
Okay.
pack.
All
And there's a
right.
little bit of local tea and some little cards and buttons and stuff like that.
Wonderful. Okay. So that now you know you have to come into the store and get a signed copy of Double Shot Death, and you get something fun too, as long as they last. So you'll have to come quick. Thank you again, Kelly, so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
I'll see you later.
Bye.